Yeah. You're listening to Autodesk's Digital Builder Podcast, a show that inspires construction professionals to innovate and use technology to improve how they build our world. I'm Eric Thomas, and I've been working in construction for nearly a decade. And now I have the privilege to sit down with industry trailblazers to hear how they're solving construction's biggest challenges and redefining the future of the built environment. We are at Autodesk. It is day 3, Autodesk University. Gentlemen, how are you feeling today? Are you fired up? You feeling good?
Yeah, it's been a good AU so far. I'm looking forward to the rest of the day.
I'm so glad that you're both here to join me. And sitting immediately to my right is Marek Suchocki, the head of industry associations and strategy from Autodesk. And to his right is David Purdon, the technical director at Diatec. So today we are going to be talking all about BIM mandates in Europe and what the implications of those happen to be. I think there's potentially some misconceptions, but also a lot of learnings that are coming from your experiences in the industry and just, broader lessons learned as we apply more mandates in the different regions as, our BIM methodologies move forward. Marek, to start us off today, could you take a moment to give a little bit about your background? I think your experience, and David's as well, is super compelling, and I think it's a great level set for the rest of the conversation we're having.
Yeah, well, whilst I kind of probably look like I'm only about 21 years of age, wishful thinking, I've been in this industry for about 32 years and spent probably the best part of 20 years in industry working in a variety of roles. I'm a civil engineer, chartered civil engineer, and I've worked in contracting, I've worked in engineering consulting, and I've done academic research. And funnily enough, that took me on a journey around digital construction. So I've spent about the last 14 years in Autodesk and in a number of roles, but often externally facing with customers and representing Autodesk at professional standards bodies, institutions, which is where I've actually ended up as my role today.
You've had such an interesting journey. You're heavily involved in ISO 19650 and some of the mandates and just writing those standards. It's the second time you've been on Digital Builder, so I'm appreciative that you're returning. So the first one probably didn't go too badly, at least. Marching forward there. And David, could you do a little bit of the same and just give the high-level overview of your experience, please?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Kind of similar to Marek. I'm about 25 years in the industry. Started industrial design, moving into working in architecture, GIS, moving across various different roles and jobs, IT. And then over the last 10 years, I've been heavily involved in digitization and kind of digital transformation of predominantly the Irish industry.
All right. Well, I appreciate that baseline. And for those that are unfamiliar, you might not be from Europe or you haven't been paying very much attention. There are starting to become more BIM mandates that are being, implemented in the region and other geos as well. I think there's some interesting things happening in APAC as well. But Marek, without really focusing on any particular region to start us off, could you give us a high-level overview of what exactly a BIM mandate is and what the implications of implementing one have for the contractors that are working in that region?
I mean, fundamentally, the intention of a BIM mandate or a BIM specification is that a client, and ideally public sector, is demanding better from industry, but also with an objective that is to improve the taxpayer investments. So we build schools, we build roads, we build prisons. And if we spend too much money in the build and the actual resultant facility doesn't meet needs, then we as taxpayers have had a poor service from our governments. So a BIM mandate is saying, I think BIM can help us get better value from those public construction investments. And it's up to the industry to then embrace what that means. And I'm sure we'll discuss that in due course.
I appreciate that baseline. And do you have anything else to add to that? I think Marek kind of knocked that answer out of the park, but I just want to make sure we have the broad perspective.
Well, I think the key thing is looking at how a mandate can help better outcomes, because the reality of it is there's such a diverse set of outcomes that's happening across all all projects and all construction projects. But I think when you're dealing with like local government and the national development plans that are kind of put together, you have to have those contingencies to make sure you have consistent outcomes. So a mandate becomes a crucial component of that.
It makes a lot of sense. And so we're seeing some of this happen in the United Kingdom and then also in Ireland most recently. And so my next question actually goes to you, David. Can you share a little bit more about your perspective on the broader intentions when those BIM mandates in Ireland were announced, and what's been rolled out so far? What's the state of the journey?
It's earmarked to start in January 2024. Essentially, the Irish government and the National Development Plan have set out a 48-month, 4-year window to essentially make all National Development Plan projects have a BIM mandate attached to them, starting with 100 million and then gradually going down to any project less than $1 million by month 48.
And it sounds like, the acceleration of that might be exciting for some of the contractors, maybe a little bit less so if they're not so eager to embrace that. But Marek, I'd love if you could take a moment to, contrast the original intent of BIM mandates in the United Kingdom and compared to what actually unfolded in the rollout in the UK. What's that idealized state where you started, and how did that shape up?
I'll take a little while to explain because I think this is a look back story. So in the past, we used drawings, paper and pencil, and that was then improved by organizations like Autodesk with AutoCAD. So we, rather than drawing on paper and pencil, we drew lines and arcs in the computer. And the big advantage being I could rub things out without having to use an eraser or a razor blade to make a correction. I could delete the line, replace it, and CAD revolutionized basically the production of technical drawings. As we then moved forward in particularly sort of the 90s, we had the emergence of three-dimensional modeling and the beginning of sharing information. People might remember FTP sites and that kind of thing. And then email came along. And what was interesting is I know from personally working in consulting that my manager would check everything I did. It's not he didn't trust me, he just made sure I didn't make spelling mistakes. So if I sent a letter out, I would write the letter, he would check it. We'd often give it to maybe a typing pool to type it up, and then we would proofread it, check it, sign it, send it in the post. And the same was true for drawing production. When we had computer-generated models and email, people stopped doing that. They would just send each other, and so we lost control. So in a way, from the UK side at least, the BIM mandate was not so much about thou shalt use Revit. It was more saying, well, you're using Revit, but you're not using it under control. So we introduced the idea of the common data environment to standardize the information creation, exchange, and use. It's often getting confused about, the modeling. It's not about modeling, it's the information management.
That makes a bunch of sense too. And I really like that analogy email changed how we work. It was such a dramatic thing. And I couldn't imagine, I'm showing my age right now, late 30s, handwriting out all my letters and having somebody proofread to that level of detail. And so your point is astute in that there's a balance there in the sense that we're more autonomous and free to, collaborate and communicate, make all these choices, but it also kind of opened the floodgates. I think we've all been stuck on a, reply all thread in a, 14,000 person company where you're just sitting here going, please unsubscribe me, and you go, that's not helping. Please don't do that anymore. And, that's just a really small example in the broader context of what we're doing. But I really like that. So David, I'd like to kick this to you to kind of start off looking more at the pain points in the different regions as this rollout happened. And so could you tell me, how are people feeling right now? And what are the biggest concerns that folks have as this January 1st milestone, I guess, starts to show up?
One of the fortunate things that Ireland has is that we were able to just look at our nearest neighbour and just watch and watch and watch. And then once they figured it out, we were able to say, yeah, we can do that.
Sometimes copying is a very, very nice form of flattery.
Absolutely. So we've a lot of the kind of larger clients that I deal with have gone through this journey already. They're all BIM compliant. They're all really good, highly technical, very good at what they do. The challenge is the supply chain and the people below who maybe their general methodology of production is more about shop drawings and fabrication, not about building BIM models. So the feedback generally is a little bit of apprehension. But I do think what I've seen is that a lot of the local, the lean construction groups, the Construction Industry Federation, all the various different bodies are putting together documentation to walk through supply chain. Because I think one of the key things in that is that you have to make it relevant to you and not look at the wider picture, because if you look at the horizon, you'll never get anything done. And I think one of the biggest fears for most people is standing still thinking it will just go away. It won't.
That's very accurate. And I like the nuance of making it about you or each individual organization or company type, because there's so much wrapped up in that. And it's very easy to look at that big pie in the sky vision. And if your slice isn't very clearly identified, either you don't understand the urgency or you're not sure what you need to be acting on now because the messages are either too broad or focused on organizations that are much larger than you or dealing with different circumstances. It really does come back to communication as far as how do we communicate the intention of, the BIM mandate or how every role fits into that. And so I can see why there's some concern, because you look at this and you go, well, to your point, I manufacture something in 2D. It doesn't make sense for me to be investing in this technology. And so how do we ensure that we're empowering everybody to be successful in that situation, while also ensuring that the overall vision is still intact? That's a very nuanced dance to unpack. I can imagine there's hesitancy, to put it politely, in some folks' minds.
Yep, absolutely.
Marek, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how that contrasts to how things unfolded in the United Kingdom and how people felt at the beginning of that journey and, how things feel today where you're sitting.
Well, again, I'll try and take us back a few years. We're in Las Vegas, where Autodesk University. We're full of geeks. The people here are tech lovers, and I regret I was one of them from the mid-90s. And the UK, actually, people might not be aware, but BIM, in some respects, we pioneered it. We had some of the very early BIM tools that were developed there. Some of the people that worked on what is now Revit came from the UK. So we were really pushing the boundaries of object-based modeling rather than 3D CAD. It was more about that kind of Lego kind of concept of you assemble things from discrete objects. And we also understood the value that object could have by having attached information. Myself and a number of others, we did some research projects during the noughties, like Heathrow Terminal 5 was a really big test case. And we identified that, yes, you do have to do all that information management, get the control in there. But the end opportunity is that, as well as having the three-dimensional representation, you also had richer information. So asset data was coming in. And we then worked with government and said, look, government, this is a really good idea, because not only will you hopefully get more certainty in the project delivery, but at the end, you'll actually have information that you can use to manage your schools, prisons, hospitals, roads, etc., in a much more modern way. And so I think, in a way, to just the point that David made is also that we often internalize these things. So it's about us, but actually there is a bit of a greater good thing going on here, where if we all start structuring data, we all understand our role in the food chain of the construction project, then the greater good could be realized. So if somebody in that chain stops doing what they should do, then it's kind of it unravels. Even if it's not a mandate but a specification, then it's forcing people that you have to deliver in these ways.
I love that. There's a level playing field that we're all dealing with at that point, and I have empathy, because I'm sure it's not an easy transition, especially if your organization hasn't been thinking in this way, or we're very early on in their digital journey, to abruptly have this go, okay, well, you have to be fully matured in this capacity by this date. Nobody really loves that kind of mandate. I understand that, but I love that point of the greater good, that broader conversation. It's how are we thinking about the big picture and the broader industry in a way where, long term, we have all that information on that rich data that we can act on. And I love that, because I think sometimes folks will forget about the I in BIM. And that information piece, I think sometimes may have been aspirational early on as that was released. Where people go, we're going to have so much. We have all this information, this pie in the sky. We're excited. And then we got into it, and it didn't really shape up that way right away.
But I was just going to add, actually, I think a point you made, David, is that what we don't want is that everybody has to buy a copy of Revit. Obviously, Autodesk would love that. It'd be good for us as a business model. But for that I in BIM, sometimes all you have to do is provision a little bit of data in the right structured format. So it's not about everybody doing modeling. It's far from it, in fact.
I love that point too. That's a really great clarifier.
There was an interesting discussion yesterday at one of the general sessions, and they were talking about the concept of decoupling data from models. That, to me, is the way that you democratize how we do digital construction. And it's not even, to me, it's not even about digital construction anymore. It's industrialized construction. It's about process engineering. It's about defining outcomes by having a proper structure in place and everybody knows their role and they know how to do it. And I think we're going to see some really exciting examples of how this is going to change and evolve the industry going forward, because it has to change.
Yeah, and we've had such an accelerated transformation in the industry in recent years, and our move to the cloud, some felt a little bit frustrated by at times, and I empathize with that too, because it changes the way that we work so dramatically. But when we start having the difference in outcomes, as you're just very pointing out, that's when that narrative changes, and now we have access to that information. And I love Marek's point of it's not necessarily everybody is using or being inside the BIM model. It's we're able to give you the piece of information that you need in an accessible way and not in a burdensome way too, because I know we all can think back not very long ago where you had your SharePoint server or whatever kind of server you have. And somebody says, well, we're digitized now. Our PDFs are in the cloud. Everybody can access them. And I appreciate that. That is a step forward from having massive plans all over your project site. But that's not the digitization that we're talking about here, because that's just a timestamp of information that you can access if you would like to, but it doesn't have the depth. It's not something you interact with. It doesn't have the project communication attached to it and all of that information that I think everybody's really excited about right now. And so we get to build on that. I feel like when we start introducing standards or BIM models, it's a real opportunity for the industries and the places that we serve and the folks that are living and using and interacting with the facilities we're building. There's so much here that we can kind of go through. So I'd like to hear, David, a little bit more. Are there any other specific pain points that are coming up at this stage that you think would be worth sharing or identifying, especially if somebody's out there not sure what they should be doing right now?
One of the key things that we learn from watching, or as I said, our nearest neighbors, is it's about how you build the ecology of benefit. Because the early adopters were very concerned about, okay, if I implement, ISO 9650 or PAS at the time, how do I maintain benefit from this? Am I passing the benefit forward, or am I actually bringing the benefit down to all the supply chain I deal with? And it was very hit and miss. So I think this time around, because of the way that, say, the Irish one is kind of structured, is kind of forcing a lot of the kind of industry leaders to kind of really look at how they manage the supply chain and say, right, I need to bring you on this journey and I need to kind of set the tone. I need to tell you exactly what you need to do and remove the burden and responsibility for you to figure this out. We're one team. We want a good outcome. Let's do it together. So I think that for me will be the big thing I would say that we've watched from afar, and not even just the UK, but even the other geos around the world who implemented BIM through Mandate. There's some fantastic examples out there now. So we've got a lot to kind of look at and say, okay, well, that's good practice that we can take.
Yeah, I wish the United States was being a little more progressive in how we adopt standardization, whether it's regarding BIM or ISO 19650, because, we're state to state to state to state, and the differentiation makes it a little harder to learn from each other as far as, best practices and lesson learns. But the unfortunate thing, and something I learned from Marek actually in our first conversation, is you have to write your standards for a new project then if you don't have this model to apply from ground zero. And granted, you might get there, but it does waste a lot of time if you just don't go, I'm going to grab this and we're using it and we're moving forward. So I also think there's a lot of opportunity. And Marek, actually, that's where I want to pivot to now is, can you tell me a bit more about what some of these positives or exciting points or aspirational points that we haven't touched on already from these mandates really bring to the table? Like, what should people be excited about instead of being a little bit grumpy if they're looking at everything that's coming down the line?
The potential opportunities and benefits are massive. So, David said, it's about each organization needs to understand its journey and what its role is in this. So, if I'm a consultant, a contractor, an architect, or a supplier in the food chain, if I can work out what good it will do for me, I can improve my business. And I think there is a point to be said that, we're in the paradigm shift from analog to digital in our industry. And I'd almost argue it's unacceptable that a professional organization is not embracing the digital opportunity in its services to its clients and to the partner organizations. Because when you do that, then we're all on that same journey together. We're all understanding, structuring data, using standards, as you said. But also, you all know very well from all the podcasts you've had, our industry isn't the most attractive. It's often the last choice for young people coming out of school. But if we use digital tools, some of the things that we see at events like Autodesk University, oh my God, they're wowy. You know, they're exciting. They're, dare I even say sexy?
I would agree with you there.
You know, so how are we going to attract young people into our industry if it's not by saying, well, if you come and work for this engineering consultant, they're using virtual reality to inspect buildings, and they're bringing their clients in. Oh, and you can even use gaming engines to simulate stuff. That's going to attract young people. And I think that's kind of the real benefits for the organization, is that you get the right people in, you get people to stay, and you're still delivering the enhanced service to your customers.
Yeah, it's such a multi-layered thing, because if you think about it, we have to, for our clients, we have to digitize. We're under shorter schedule durations. We have material supply chain issues. We have labor shortages, much tied to what you're talking about here. And if we're not able to take advantage of the things that we can control, and our digital journey is actually one of those things, whether it's tied to our profitability or the way we communicate and collaborate, if we're not doing our due diligence here, it's so much harder to step out of that. And it's always a bummer to me when I meet somebody and they go, oh, construction is just pounding nails and digging holes. And it's like, well, that is absolutely a part of the work that we do. But there are so many other things that we can consider here in the cool VR and all the other really sexy technologies that are all over this expo hall that we're sitting in right now. Are those levers that get to bring folks into the industry. We get them excited from that. But think about it, if you look at two like general contractors, one of them has all of this robust VDC team and technology and all this cool stuff, and you're using drones, and one of them still has paper on their projects, and they're using Dropbox to put their folders on, and they're going to pay the same amount of money, and they go, which company do you want to work for? And if you're trying to bring a younger person into the industry, they're going to go to that tech savvy company every single time, because they go, what do you mean I can't use an iPad on the project?
Yeah.
And it's, I know I'm being a little flippant in the way I'm describing it right now, but I think it's just important to think about that. You're not only thinking about the baseline of your business with these digital tools, you're also thinking about the long-term longevity of your business and the people that are interested in staying there or joining that business. It's such a multi-layered nuance.
But that's the critical point now, is it's about business and process. It's about project delivery and business. Like, people were making decisions about technology and software to facilitate one part of what they were, which was the project delivery cycle. But they weren't thinking about how they were bridging their business processes together to get better outcomes and better visibility and all the things they need to make proper informed decisions. But I think the key point that you kind of touched on there is you got to look at the audience that we are now talking to now. Disposable generation, they consume information massively, and then you ask them a question about it, 5 minutes later they can't remember. But the truth of it is you need to give them technology that allows them to consider the processes you're putting in place as being viable. But then that's how you attract the people. And for success for a lot of clients, it's those three things. It's people, process, and technology. If you focus on one or two at the expense of the third, it's like the PM triangle. It's like, I can give you quality and cost at the expense of time. And it's the same when it comes to implementing BIM. You have to follow these three tenets together and apply equally as much effort and time as possible.
Anybody who doesn't put people at the top of that stack rank, I kind of side eye, because they're our most critical asset, because we're not able to build, and we have to be taking care of them. And we have a lot of work to do in our industry to tackle the perception problem that Marek brought up. And I think conversations like this hopefully start driving that forward. But we are also talking in an echo chamber right now. All of these folks here are already tech enabled and excited, and we're here for a reason. And so it's when we step outside of these swim lanes and start, going to universities and showing folks what we're doing. We're also having to do that housekeeping internally and be like, how are we taking care of our people? Because, we don't have a great perception oftentimes. And how do you sell somebody on a 65-hour work week with a, general superintendent who loves to scream at you at the end of the day? You're probably not going to get somebody who's much younger, especially, to look at that and go, sign me up. Even though the trades are very lucrative and there's a really great career path there, we have to make some changes and there's some work to do. So, yeah. But I think there is a lot of positives that we can build out of this. It's going to take some work. I'm optimistic for what the long term is going to be for your friends over in Ireland as they continue to move these mandates forward. And I'm so glad that you had, the United Kingdom to look to say what worked and what didn't. And we go, all right, we're going to step over here now because that one didn't feel well. So anyway, I have one final question for both of you today. And I really enjoy this question because the answers vary so widely. Marek's answered it before, so I'm going to have him go second. since he's a repeat guest here. So David, what is one tool that you use on every project, no matter what you're working on?
Technical pen and a scale ruler.
All right. And why is that? Give me a little bit of context.
Because I come from a generation that learned on the drafting board. I kind of like to go back to that from time to time and just kind of feel
There's
it
a
in my hand.
tactical feel to it.
Yeah. So that's the thing that I kind of miss at times based on, the technology is great and stuff, but there's a part of me that misses the feel of the paper, feel of the pen. So yeah, the technical pens and scale rulers.
I love that answer. Marek, how about you? Where would you focus as far as what tool you're going to bring to every project?
Well, I mean, I'll reveal that last time I think I said a notebook and a pencil or pen, because it's quicker, in fact, for me to write. I mean, I know you can use iPads and Apple Pencils and it does recreate it, but I still felt it was quicker. I'll couple that to my answer this time around, which is my ears. We all love to talk. This podcast has been great fun. We could have carried on for hours, I'm sure. There's so many things we didn't discuss. I think it's also really important to listen, because it does two things. One, if you listen well, you might learn something, you might hear something, but it's also a respect thing to the other person. So when your mouth's not moving, you should be listening. Unfortunately, you mentioned, David, earlier that our generations today, everyone's got the phone in front of them continuously. We're multitasking. And I think, if you can just slow down a little bit, just be in the room, that kind of thing. So, I'll say the tool is use my ears as much as I can.
I like that. And listening skills are a tremendous part of communication skills more broadly. And, sometimes folks can forget that, and if you're really excited, you might be just waiting for your time to say words, and that might not be a very inclusive conversation as you're just waiting to go, go, go. But there's so many things you can learn, both about just somebody's, temperament in the moment, both just how they're speaking and what they're telling you, even if they're not saying other things. And so there's a big narrative there. So I love that build on your last answer. Thank you for revealing it again. And it tracks back to, what David brought up too. So I think you guys are, two like minds, which is awesome. But again, thank you so much for joining me again on Digital Builder. It's been a real pleasure getting to understand the impacts of these mandates, but also the broader aspirations and positives that can come from this. And so, for everybody out there listening, if you're feeling frustrated, I feel like there's very justifiable reasons why, but it's also important to step back and lean in on, what's the greater good and what are the long-term outcomes that we're going to experience in this moment. So again, thank you so much. And of course, if you're out there listening to Digital Builder, we are a video first podcast. So make sure you head over to the Autodesk Construction Cloud YouTube channel. All of our backlog is there. There's a bunch of great episodes. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you're going to go find podcasts, you can find out and listen to all of our backlog. Beyond that, of course, I am Eric Thomas. You can go find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Eric that works for Autodesk and also happens to host a podcast, so I should not be hard to find. Or you can find me on Twitter at builder_digital. And until next time, goodbye.